Hello and welcome to the Telos podcast. This is Camelia, and today I am in conversation with Lenka Učník, trainer at Monash Professional Pathways, Monash College in Australia. We discuss her article titled Conscience, Morality, Judgment, the Bond Between Thinking and Political Action in Hannah Arendt, published in Telos, issue 192, fall of 2020. Lenka, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me, Camelia.
Could you start with the problem of the nature of moral judgment in the context of the Adolf Eichmann trial?
Okay, yeah, sure. So this is really the catalyst for what becomes Hannah Arendt's sort of later works on the life of the mind. And the reason this is important is that during this trial, Arendt went there because originally, as she kind of told her then editor of the New Yorker, she really wanted to be confronted with evil because she'd sort of thought about this question for a long time. And so when she went to the Eichmann trial, she was kind of suddenly surprised because what she was expecting to meet and what the prosecution was trying to portray was this evil demonic monster who, actively sort of sent many Jewish people to their deaths. And yet what Arendt saw was not a monster, not a demon, but actually a man who perpetrated absolutely atrocious deeds. She never said he didn't, but he seemed to actually, rather than being some kind of evil, kind of embodiment of evil, he was just this person who for her demonstrated this complete inability to autonomously think and judge the time and the situation he found himself. And, of course, since then there have been some publications of the Eichmann diaries that sort of undermine some of Arendt's claims. But I think what really struck her, and I think is still relevant, is this idea of to be able to think and judge autonomously. And it's really important for her because one of the problems is that as soon as you claim someone is radically evil, they are so evil that this is why they did this, it completely forecloses any discussions about the events because he's evil, we're normal, regular people, therefore we would never do such an act. And she's like, no, actually what he's doing is something that she seemed evident in the world all around her, which was that he readily kind of appropriated stock phrases and cliches when answering questions. He readily kind of said things without any kind of underlying meaning to them. And yet these things kind of created his reality. And one of the things I think Peg Birmingham actually said was that the winged words that Himmler used to use, which Eichmann actually mentioned in the trial about how he kind of liked these winged words. He used a lot of them during the trial. Peg Birmingham actually said something about that these sort of slogans actually kind of covered over the problem of conscience by creating a framework that normalizes an extreme set of circumstances. And we can kind of see this happening today, with lots of kind of catchphrases, people talking about if so-and-so wins, we'll all end up in concentration camps. Yet they really do believe that. But if you ask anything deeper than that, there is no more than that. And it's, to be clear, it doesn't mean that these kind of stock phrases and cliches silenced Eichmann's conscience. But what they did do is they transformed it by the voice or voices of another. And yet at the same time, they also, to him personally, felt like they were completely self-fabricated. So it's no longer him repeating other words. He has repeated these words so many times that now he believes them. And so suddenly, by refusing to look at Eichmann as inherently evil and identifying this problem of independent thought and judgment, Arendt suddenly finds herself faced with this complex problem concerning the very nature of what is moral judgment. And this particular problem can't be answered by her previous work on political action and the political realm alone. So this is the reason why she kind of then starts to want to have a look at why people actually act like they do and not just dealing with action, because she realizes that the two are connected. They're not the same, but they're connected. And so now she wanted to kind of have a look at, what prepares the ground for acting, what allows people to judge independently regardless of the political consequences, even when everything around them is giving them completely different signs and signals. And secondly, she also kind of thought, okay, in situations where the public domain is completely eroded and there is no more space for genuine political debate and discussion, these kind of ideas to actually be able to think and judge independently can in themselves become political precisely in the moments of refusing to go along. So those people who said, no, I can't, they actually ended up becoming political, not because they were political actors doing politically active kind of events like in her earlier work, but precisely for the opposite reason of refusing to go along with what has now been normalised. So I think this is the kind of outcome of Arendt's attendance at the Eichmann trial, and it's what kind of leads her to question what the nature of moral judgment is.
Thank you for those introductory remarks. Your article focuses on contemplative thinking in Arendt's work in relation to ethics and politics. How is this kind of thinking connected to independent judgment?
Okay, so for her, she kind of she obviously now has decided she needs to kind of look at what prepares people to act, because she's faced with this idea of, the issue of moral judgment and independent thought. And so she starts to look at, in her Life of the Mind, she looks at 3 faculties of the mind: thinking, willing, and judging, and each of them have a role. The ones that have been written about the most clearly are thinking and judging. But for her, the reason her idea of thinking, and so when we're thinking about thinking, the important thing you need to remember is she makes a strong distinction. So it's not about sort of systems of knowledge. So it's not kind of basically say claims about the world that, theories and methods and practices, those things can change, and they're aimed at finding something truthful about the world. That may then be changed because of new discoveries, but it's not about making evaluative decisions about things like that. Thinking in this sense is very much just a process. It's that idea that we might often call reflective thinking. It's when you kind of withdraw from the world to kind of ruminate and reflect on things. And her idea of thinking doesn't aim at truth, it aims at meaning. Yeah. And so the idea for her is that thinking is like a critical faculty. And for her, she believes that if people kind of nurtured this critical faculty, they would be less likely to kind of blindly follow a set of norms and be swept away by sort of dangerous consensus. And for her, thinking basically questions everyday assumptions. Yeah. And it kind of, by representing things that are absent and looking for meaning, what she hopes is that it would reveal that no idea should be accepted with absolute certainty. Yeah. Also, she kind of has this idea that she talks about called thinking without banisters. Basically, for her, banisters are sort of basically the systems that provide a structure, to allow people to make evaluative judgments. So, for example, she sort of says that people who kind of rely on these pre-established guidelines, to tell you what's right, what's wrong, what's good, what's bad, are often the first ones to take up a new replacement if the situation arises. And the reason why is because it's the role of the system that's actually the most important in these situations, not actually the content. And so when the function of a predetermined system is of primary importance, this is when frightening things can happen, because very easily a different predetermined system can replace that. And so this is another reason she finds thinking very important, because again, because of this kind of unraveling critical faculty, it allows, or she hopes it would allow, people to maintain a critical mindset when presented with anything offered as a definitive answer or solution to a complex set of problems. And by drawing out kind of the underlying assumptions or the undercurrent of unexamined opinions, and kind of critique and investigate the issues going on, she hopes that it has the potential to sort of destroy sort of the hidden fallacies. Where thinking then, but however, she also specifies that thinking in itself is not political. If you kind of sit around and reflect on the world and break things apart and decide that there's no ultimate truth and whatever, but then you do nothing about that, whatever you've come to in this kind of moment of kind of critical reflection just disappears. Yeah, it just vanishes. Where it becomes political is through her faculty of judgment, because in the faculty of judgment is when you basically re-enter the world. And her idea of judgment is about being able to judge a particular set of circumstances without necessarily using a predetermined set of structures to decide for you what to do. So, the classic examples would be things like, it's always wrong to steal, but maybe a man stealing medicine for his dying wife is not so wrong. Yeah. Also, all of these people here are murderers. Now you look at this in a particular circumstance, maybe that's not necessarily true. So for her, if people cannot judge particular circumstances and they basically kind of accept kind of overarching narratives to guide their understanding of the world, it's very easy to now categorize large groups of people as evil, or this particular kind of practice as bad, or this particular lifestyle as, morally corrupt or whatever. Whereas if you are able to remove yourself a bit and reflect, well, what does that actually mean? What does this person being bad actually mean? Why are they bad? How are they different from me? Why is this particular kind of lifestyle morally corrupt? What is the corruption going on? Why do I consider that to be in this way? If you start doing those things, you're more likely to be able to judge the particular circumstance rather than this kind of sort of umbrella sort of system that tells you something. And as a result, it might minimize the potential for, again, being swept away in these kind of mass sort of judgments. And so for her, through thinking, it draws out the undercurrent of unexamined opinions, and it allows judging to make evaluative decisions about events without subsuming those events under pre-established standards. Yeah, so rather than sort of relying on overarching narratives to guide your decisions, she wants you to make judgments about those things independently. And as a result, she kind of feels like judgment for her could be the most political of these three faculties, because it's only through judgment that anything that comes about through the process of thinking becomes real again, becomes political. And it becomes political because she believes it could limit the influence of dogmas, it could limit the power of sweeping statements, and also it will not make it as easy to make claims to the true states of matters. Yeah. And we can see that now with conflicting truths constantly going on, and people will argue about something even when everything around them suggests that it's completely untrue. And these are precisely the things that Arendt's sort of talking about. Yeah. So, anyway, so that's the link between those two, I think.
Lenka, thank you for being here today.
Thank you very much for having me.
This was Lenka Učník, and her article is titled Conscience, Morality, Judgment, the Bond Between Thinking and Political Action in Hannah Arendt, and it was published in Telos, issue 192, fall of 2020.